and welcome to The Straw Hat with Rabbi David Wolkenfeld and Rabbinate Goldie Guy. We are the official podcast of Anshe Shalom B'nai Israel Congregation, an Orthodox synagogue in the Lakeview neighborhood of Chicago, Illinois.
So our Torah portion this week, Teitzei, opens in a really hard way. It describes going off to war and a series of events that can unfold in the aftermath of war. The first opening mitzvah, if you will, describes the ways in which a woman taken in battle can be eventually made into the wife of the soldier who captures her in battle. And then the next mitzvah in the Torah, seemingly unconnected, talks about a man with two wives, one whom he hates, and the Torah prohibits him from favoring or disfavoring the children of that hated wife when it comes to arranging for his estate to be divided. And then the Torah talks about a rebellious child who is killed, the Torah tells us, because the signs of his early rebellion point to the Talmud says, Nidon Shem Sofo, right? He's going to have a really, really violent end, and so he's killed for his rebelliousness. So really hard series of really negative, violent mitzvot. Rashi points out that these negative mitzvot all come back to that first mitzvah. If you take a wife in battle, this is what's going to happen. That decision will haunt you for generations, and no good will come from that. But then that raises the obvious question, why is the Torah allowing this to happen if it's a really bad idea? And Rashi uses a phrase from the Tanchuma I think is really worth kind of thinking about every time I encounter it. I think it really hits me. He says, Lo dibra Torah ela keneged yetzer hara. The Torah is speaking to confront the evil inclination. I don't know, how would you translate that?
I think it's that the Torah is speaking to accommodate for what it knows is possible in the possibility of what people might do, right? This is the human experience. Some people are drawn towards this more negative, violent side, and the Torah is accommodating for that.
Yeah, but accommodating not in the sense of, people are bad, so go ahead and be bad. Accommodating in the sense of here's this terrible fact of the
addressing
reality
all possible
of
options.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, accommodating as approving, right?
Right.
It's definitely not. It doesn't seem like approval from these psukim.
Right. It doesn't seem like approving because, the captive wife is described, she's mourning for her family, right? That's she's described in a much more sympathetic way than the guy who takes her in battle, right? She's given more emotional fullness. So I don't think taking her is approved of. And then especially if you understand the sequence of mitzvot as being describing the negative consequence of doing this. So the Torah is not approving. The Torah is harm mitigation. It's saying here's this really, really violent, negative, terrible thing that sometimes happens during war, and here's a way to make it a little bit more kind and a little bit more compassionate. But I think if one pays attention to the Torah, the goal is to not engage in this behavior altogether. And I would go so far as to say even reach a point as human society develops and progresses where this type of battlefield sexual violence or taking prisoners of war as personal slaves, it becomes abolished altogether, which...
Right, I would hope so, right? There's this idea, this group of laws is so tough, and right, there's kind of amazing Gemara around it, and teaching these sets of laws to a group of teenagers, especially the last one, which is Ben Sorer Moreh, when it's kind of talking about them and saying, well, a rebellious child.
How'd that go for you? How'd that work out for you?
Oh my. It is an experience, right? Because there's a visceral reaction of, what do you mean his parents bring him to court? What do you mean his parents put him on trial and then ultimately give him over to be... What does that... How can I understand that as a student reading that in high school and saying, yeah, this is in our Torah, right? That's what the... So... Ultimately, one of the ways to teach it is that the rabbis kind of interpret it out of existence, in a way that the circumstances are so limited by the oral Torah, the circumstances in which these laws apply. Right, the Ben Sorer Moreh has to fit such specific criteria that ultimately it ends up being that this case never exists. Right, so that's what I'm thinking about or never could exist, never existed, right? They interpret it out of existence. So that's what I'm thinking about as you were saying that, about these other kind of tough laws about war, about taking a woman captive in war, right? Maybe there's an avenue for that as well, of saying, well, it's such specific circumstances.
Yeah, unfortunately, we know that that type of sexual violence is still a part of warfare in many parts of the world, and so
Yes.
if only we reached a point where it would be a mere theoretical, Jewish something to like kind of think about and contemplate and kind of like draw meaning from just being able to contemplate it theoretically. Like it still is a part of the world, of the reality, but there is also international law, and there are conventions against war crimes, and there are armies that try to impose like ethical standards on their soldiers. Even the best armies fail pretty frequently in imposing those rules on their soldiers, but we try, and I think the fact that such behavior is forbidden by the Geneva Conventions, for over 100 years already, I think can show some degree of advancement, whereas in the time of the Torah, it was impossible to forbid this behavior merely to mitigate the harm. We're in a place where it is possible to forbid it. However, maybe, I don't know, not effectively. So maybe,
so tough.
I guess you could be optimistic
So
or pessimistic. You could say, yeah, we have stricter rules, but we don't follow them. I'd like to think that shows some amount of progress over the centuries. But I think the Torah is pushing us to move beyond the basic, low ethical bar the Torah is setting in this area. It's pushing us.
Or certainly the commentators, right? Or certainly Rashi is pushing us that way.
Yes, right. Like Rashi would not, if you said to Rashi, "Here's my battlefield bride," Rashi would not say, "Wonderful, like I'm so proud of you," right? Like you missed the point if you do, Rashi would say, I think, right? The point is not to do this, and any student of Torah should understand that Rashi's telling us.
Right.
I think this opens a door to understanding the Torah much more broadly in a more subtle, nuanced way. 'Cause, some mitzvot seem really, really exalted and refined and reflect a really high goal to strive for, right? To be open-handed in your generous giving of food and money to the poor. That's a really high standard, right?
Whereas
always
here
remember
it's speaking to baser instincts, right, instead of the higher
right,
instincts.
exactly. So it's sort of hard to some places of the Torah seems really. I wish I could fulfill this mitzvah in its fullness, and some mitzvot. Other place in the Torah, it's no, this mitzvah is not for you. This mitzvah is for our ancient Near Eastern ancestors who lived in a much more violent world, who needed these types of mitzvot to reduce the worst possible harm that they could cause one another, and this mitzvah we don't need anymore. So I guess I think the richness of the Torah is that it contains all these kinds of mitzvot and is both cases, and I guess the challenge for us is to figure out where the Torah is this ethical goal to strive for, and where the Torah is pushing us towards moral development that already took place in some cases centuries ago.
I don't know. With the news coming out of Israel this past week, it's very hard to read these verses charitably.
I think I know what you're alluding to, but maybe just going to be explicit because our listeners might not have heard this. It's very hard.
There's an allegation of rape. A 16-year-old girl came forward with an allegation of rape against a group of men. She was vacationing in Eilat, and she brought the allegation to the police. There are different testimonies coming forth. Nothing has been proven, but there's a huge conversation around that going on in Israel right now, as the conversation around these crimes.
Yeah. It's a shocking story. I mean, it's the number of men involved it's dozens, right? It's a horrific scale of this.
We don't know, and the threshold at which it'll take to convict, right? So this is definitely resonating with current events of thinking.
Yeah.
I don't want to see permissiveness even in, right? Rashi's saying the Torah is speaking to the baser instincts of man, and saying let's put laws to give a framework around this, because you shouldn't be only giving in to your baser instincts. So let's make a set of laws, make a set of boundaries, and right, it's certainly not enough, right, to look at this and say, well, of course we've got Rashi's criticism, and then looking at it as a modern reader now, we have to go way far beyond it.
I agree. I agree. And I think there are no shortcuts. Like you can't.
Certainly.
Sometimes it seems civilization is a very thin veneer, and like it takes very little.
Absolutely, right. That we're still speaking about it this week. The same crimes, right? That's what I'm saying. It's not that this is an ancient Near Eastern text, like coming out of that milieu. No, it's speaking to the instincts of humankind that exist now, that are in the news now, that we need to be talking about and thinking about, and advocating around.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing happening right now in our congregation is we are accepting RSVPs or seat requests for in-person tefillah on Rosh Hashanah. We hope to do the same for Yom Kippur in the coming days. And for all of our listeners who are in Chicago or will be in Chicago for Rosh Hashanah, I want to really encourage you to fill out that form and request a spot. We are at this point striving really, really hard to find a place for in-person tefillah for every member of the shul who requests it. If possible, we can make some spots available for non-members and guests, but we're prioritizing members because spaces are going to be severely limited because of all of the health guidelines that are in place. And of course, the last minute, it could all be, we might have to, have more strict restrictions, and none of this may be possible, but we figured it's easier to cancel something that's planned to the last minute than to plan something that, at the last minute that had not been planned. So we are moving ahead with these tentative plans to have in-person tefillah, but it's really important that people fill out the forms if they might be interested in doing so. We understand many of you, for very good reasons, are going to be davening at home or elsewhere, but if you want to attend an indoor or outdoor, distanced, masked, shortened Rosh Hashanah Tefillah, please fill out the form on the website. It was sent out an email. There's sort of like a chicken and egg kind of problem. We until we know how many people want to attend indoors or outdoors and what times they prefer to do so, it's hard for us to know how many options to make available and plan for. So we're sort of guessing how many, but we really, really try to fill out those forms. I know it's a very fraught decision to make, and many people feel great ambivalence and anxiety about praying, together in person, and I totally validate that. But make a decision, or make a tentative decision, please, because we need to make a decision.
Right, and as we think forward on family programming that we'll have over the holidays as well, we also need input from the community. We're thinking about a backyard Camp Shana Tova situation where we run activities in a health-conscious, safe, socially distanced, masked, and limited attendance under all those precautions in that way. We're actually recruiting and actively looking for people who have outdoor space that we might use for that limited in-person youth programming over the holidays. So if you are available or know someone who has available space that we might use for the shul, please reach out. It would be really, really useful as we continue to tackle that chicken and egg problem of how many people are around, who we're catering to, who's coming to these programs, and how we can provide that programming.
So can I ask you a question about just what was it like to attend our Shabbat Tefillot? I guess this was already 2 weeks now that you've been in Chicago, because you had, if I'm not mistaken, you had not been going to
I was
mini,
very, very much self-isolating before I came to Chicago, and suddenly I'm thrust into this role where it's my job to meet people and be present in the congregation, be a presence in the congregation. These have been my first in-person tefillot in months.
And how new? What do you have to say?
I felt safe. I felt like all the precautions were being taken, and that made me feel good about coming. And it makes me feel good about returning, that people are taking safety seriously and taking tefillah seriously, so that the two can go hand in hand, safe tefillah. On the other hand, it's missing a spirit that there's the soul of shul, that we've got the framework of shul going on, and all the people who are putting in so much dedication to make it actually happen. And then because of the restrictions, we can't really sing. It can't be in a large crowd. It's a different feel, and that's been hard.
Yeah.
That's been hard.
guess my own experience, I would say the outdoor tefillah has felt really safe to me. I don't know, just in terms of my subjective sense, right?
Yeah, those are the only ones that I've attended have been the outdoor tefillot on Shabbat. Feels safe. And then I kind of want to burst out singing and dancing, and I have to remember I can't.
So it's good that you haven't yet, but it feels really safe to me in a way that I wasn't sure that I would feel quite that safe. So I just like that's for whatever for my own subjective senses, whatever that's worth, which maybe is very little. It's felt safe to me, and I'll also share the indoor tefillah. We don't have access to the parking lot for weekday mornings, and we've had shachrit indoors. Very distanced again with as many of you know, our shul seats 600, right? So to have 15 people in the shul that seats 600, there's lots and lots of room, and we're all masked and etc. But
that safe?
I don't know. I felt more anxious. I felt more anxious being indoors with I guess I've not been indoors very much with other people since March, and I go to the supermarket every 2 weeks, and that takes me about 45 minutes to an hour, I guess, to do a load, and that's basically the only other occasion in which I'm indoors with other people. We haven't had a guest in our home, right, in months, right? So that just my subjective sense is that is a little more anxiety about being indoors. Physicians we consult with say that it's reasonably safe if we maintain distance and wear masks, and the City of Chicago Health Department says it's legal and safe if we maintain distance and wear masks. But just it's my own subjective experience, just that's sort of how it's shaken out for me. And we know from surveys and from just what we've observed that about a third of the congregation is only comfortable with outdoor and not indoor, and as well as another third which is not comfortable with any kind of in-person gathering and is waiting till it's safer to do so, to take part in that. So I don't know. That's my
And I'm so grateful to have joined a congregation whose lay leadership and congregants in general take safety so seriously and take the health of the people around them so seriously. I really appreciate that it's been so thoughtful and so calculated and always so sensitive with the way that tefillah has been organized. I'm really grateful for that.
I'm grateful too that we've been able, we've had a real partnership between the leadership of the lay leadership and the professional team, just to really try to enhance our health standards as best we can. And that's the mikvah's made upgrades that I think we're well in advance of what other regional mikvah were doing, and the shul, we were quick to close, and we opened in a considered way, and hopefully, please God, that'll be sufficient to keep everyone safe for the coming months. Circling back to your sort of that mixed emotion, I think I shared in a note to the shul before you worked for us, so you didn't expect you to have seen it. The comparison to the scene that's described in Tanakh when the second Beit HaMikdash is built, and those who remember the first Beit HaMikdash are crying, and those who had never seen anything better are really happy, and that kind of mixture of tears and rejoicing at the same time. That still is with me when we're so happy that we can come together for something, right? That there is a minyan we can say Dvarim Shebekadusha, and we have that opportunity to see another human being in real life, not just on a screen. That is something really great. But also it wasn't that long ago. I remember what the shul was like as recently as February, when and the old people and the young people and the crowds and spirituality is so much about crowdedness. I think that's something that our teacher, Rabbi Avi Weiss, I think, has shared that spirituality, the sort of shortcut to spirituality is crowding people together, right, and bringing people close together.
The Rov Am Hadrat Melech, right?
It's not just his. Yes, right. Rov Am Hadrat Melech is.
I know that's about God, but God's also about us.
Good. Okay, so let's just translate and define. What that means that there's sort of a value, halachic value in mitzvot being done in large numbers, right? It sort of reflects the glory of the king if the king's congregation is large. So
and we're a mirror for that, for the glory of the king, right? That's I think it's all a reflective relationship.
Totally. So that's why there's halachic preference for one big shul versus many small minyanim, right? And one person makes kiddush for a whole table rather than everyone makes his or her own kiddush, right? So Rov HaMadrit Melech, let's do mitzvot, all of us together. I think what even the more so, though, I guess sort of Rabbi Weiss's point was that it's not just the numbers, also bring them together, right? He came to our shul last year and he's like, guys, you gotta need some renovations on this building because everyone's spread apart. Our building was designed in the 50s at a time when the style of prayer was very, very different from the style of prayer that we would seek out now, and it's very like anti-spiritual, like because it spreads people apart and puts people in these very cushy seats where they sit down and passively listen to the rabbi and cantor lead services. Like that was how Jews prayed in our shul in the 1950s, and that's how the building was built. And like our kind of spirituality, like find a way to bring people closer together, and that's gonna anyway. So that's all. Can't do that right now. Have to stay apart. Very hard to find that spiritual uplift from proximity when we have to stay apart.
Yeah. Speaking of, the spirit of shul and bringing back and reviving that spirit of shul that we had in the before times, we're working on a bunch of things for the high holidays and leading up to the high holidays in this month of Elul that can kind of bring that spirit home. So even if it's not in in the space, we can't gather in one space together, that will bring that spirit of high holidays and the season leading up to it home. So some of the things we're working on is a high holiday guide for you and your families that you'll have at home that will guide you through the days, a little bit of what can I do now or what's available to me now, suggestions for perhaps activities or stories to tell with your kids, songs to sing, different ideas you can share. So we're working on that. In addition, we've been thinking of, and we're going to be rolling out a series on tefillah education, a tefillot of the high holidays, short explorations of the prayers of the high holidays leading up to the high holidays, so we can get our feet wet a little bit before we're opening up the Machzor on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And something else we're working on is a tshuva Beit Midrash, where we're going to pair up people on a revolving basis using some fancy technology from Sfaria that, I don't know, Rabbi Walkenfeld, you can talk to a little more. And we're thinking of this idea called Chavruta Roulette, where we'll have like a central text that we're exploring around tshuva, around the season of repentance and returning to God, and you'll have a chance to learn with different people as you're randomly paired up through this technology. Just a chance to connect, a chance to think deeply about our own paths towards Rosh Hashanah, and think about it with people you might not have had the chance to talk to recently. So that's going to be a really great opportunity, hopefully.
It's an exciting time for the shul. You and I have had like a lot of really exciting conversations about plans, and they've begun to be fleshed out, and some of them you can have tentative dates for, and that's really exciting. And now it's like podcast official, okay? Like now, people know to look for, pay attention to the shul website, read your emails from the shul. We'll have things coming. I think the Chavruta Roulette on some tshuva theme is going to be really fun. This is something that I learned about from Sarah, from my wife who works for Sefaria. They did this. They're like launching this as like on a trial basis and making it available to a limited number of shuls. It's like a mechanism within their platform for, yes, you should feel special. And there's sort of a common text that people study, and you can sort of push a button and be linked to a chavruta through the interface of the website, and then every 5 minutes you can like find a new chavruta, and that way, as a congregation, we can all like recreate that experience of being in the same room, studying the same text together. Here we're in our different rooms from our homes, but studying the same text together. And over the course of 45 minutes or an hour, we can, each person can be paired with multiple other people all participating in the program. So I think it's a really neat way to both like study some like texts that speak to important themes of the season, as well as like get to do so with other members of our congregation, right? Which is like also like a really nice thing about the holidays, that we connect with one another. So I'm really excited about that, and we need to. The Sefaria engineers need to set it up for us. So we need them to be willing to give us an evening, but we're on their list, and they know we're interested, and so listen, pay attention, and you'll hear about that, as well as everything else that we're working on. And hopefully, really day by day, I hope we'll be able to release information about things that are happening. And as always, if you have ideas of needs that you that aren't being met yet, let us know. Or if you have ideas for ways to fulfill those needs, let us know, and we can do our best to implement those ideas or help you implement those ideas.
Yes. Or if I haven't met you, which is likely because we haven't been able to gather together, please reach out. I'd love to meet everyone, reach out with a time. We can Zoom, we can have a phone call, we can go on a socially distanced walk. Please reach out. I want to get to know you.
Great. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of The Straw Hat. This is Straw Hat producer Haley Leventhal. Sorry this week's episode was a little late. We've all been working hard, getting ready for the holidays. But as always, reach out to us if you have feedback about the podcast or questions about the holidays or things you want to see happen at the shul. We're still here, even if we haven't all seen each other in person. So please reach out to us. And I hope you all have a wonderful and safe and healthy week.